Check out this actual 1938 Popular Mechanics article. It says, this crop is gonna displace imports of raw material and it'll provide thousands of jobs for American workers throughout the land. The crop? It's hemp. Hemp was supposed to be this billion-dollar crop almost 100 years ago. More than 5,000 textile products ranging from rope to fine laces. On paper, hemp is so much better than cotton. Hemp can yield more than twice the amount of fiber per acre of crop than cotton, using only about 1/3 of the amount of water. And hemp can be more durable, more abrasion resistant, and it can be harvested in just 3 to 4 months versus 5+ months for cotton. Why on earth aren't we using it? Why hasn't it taken over cotton or polyester for that matter? Yeah, some mainstream brands have launched some hemp products, but I wouldn't call that taking over. Some estimates even predict that hemp could be a $30 billion industry by the end of the decade. But the hemp industry has been put through literal hell to get to where it is now, and there's still one massive roadblock, one crucial flaw keeping hemp from breaking out. If the industry cracks this, you'd be looking at one of the biggest business shakeups in decades and a golden opportunity for anybody who's paying attention. So I was researching online about plants for my balcony, and then I stumbled upon this, hemp clothes, some hipster trend, right? But believe it or not, hemp might have been the first plant ever used as a textile. And we know that from a decorative hemp fiber found around clay pots in Taiwan around 8000 BCE. Cotton only appeared at least a few thousand years later in Peru, then Mexico, and then in the Indus Valley. Famous Egyptian cotton,
It breathes like Egyptian cotton,
which was known as early as 2500 BCE, it wasn't really widely cultivated or adopted until the 7th century CE. And before cotton spread widely in China around the year 960, silk and hemp were still the main raw materials for clothing. Cotton only became truly popular in Europe in the 1600s when the East India Trading Company began importing on a massive scale. And one of the main advantages of hemp is how durable it was, which is why, beyond clothing, it was used to make sails and rope. But when Europeans felt the sweet, soft, easy to dye cotton fabrics, they just fell in love with them. And it's true, hemp had some problems. Now, making fabric out of hemp back in the day was a nightmare. Hemp had to be retted for weeks to loosen the bark, which basically means separating the plant fibers. Then it had to be run manually through a hemp break machine. Then there's this combing process that gives us shorter fibers that can eventually be spun into twines or cordage, which you could eventually weave into fabric. This was the same process for centuries, and most of the time it took weeks. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, weaving cotton into yarn was pretty much fully industrialized. It took minutes from the cotton gin, to the flying shuttle, to the spinning jenny, to the water frame, and finally to the spinning mule. What prompted Popular Mechanics to feature hemp was the invention of the hemp decorticator, a machine that would finally make the hemp process massively more efficient. But hemp had another problem, one that the decorticator couldn't solve. Hemp was rough.
So this is hemp fiber, this is what they claim is stronger than steel.
This is Dave Krabel. He's the founder of a nonprofit called iHemp Michigan, which aids hemp farmers in the state.
I can't break it, right? It's really strong.
Now, hemp fibers are up to 3 times stronger than cotton, which can make textiles longer lasting, but you wouldn't want your underwear to be made with this. Cotton, on the other hand, was fluffy and easy to dye. The Industrial Revolution made the UK really hungry for cotton, a business opportunity that the US took and that fueled the US economy for decades on the literal backbone of slaves. Now, the US went from exporting around 73,000 bales in 1800 to 10 million plus bales by the end of the 19th century. At one point, the US supplied 80% of the world's cotton. But even as cotton was shaping American history in a lot of bad ways, hemp survived. Kentucky was the biggest producer of hemp in the beginning of the 20th century, mostly used for cordage and ironically to make bagging for the cotton bales. And there was an active effort to find new uses for hemp. A 1916 report by the chief scientists at the USDA had even concluded that hemp was favorable for paper production in comparison to pulp wood. Hemp might have replaced paper as we know it, but 1937 would put a stop to that.
And the ultimate end of the marijuana addict.
This is the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, and it's the reason why this billion-dollar crop was hampered for the rest of the century. Quick distinction, you could say that the hemp and the marijuana plants are cousins. They look pretty similar, they come from the same genus, species, whatever. Marijuana is the cousin who loves tie-dye and late-night Taco Bell. Hemp is kind of like the boring cousin, because it has almost no THC. The official reasoning behind this bill was that marijuana was unregulated and rising in popularity among young people. But there were many other interests behind this law, and newer research has shed some light on that. For example, multiple authors claim that Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon was invested in the nylon industry through his bank.
It's
Nylon stretch, nylon yarn.
And that he found it beneficial to obstruct hemp production. But perhaps the most lasting, most pivotal push came from newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. This dude. He had been running a years-long media campaign demonizing cannabis and therefore hemp. That might or might not have been related to his investment in timber and how that report by Popular Mechanics seriously threatened his wood pulp business. And so we arrive at the last flaw. Hearst's campaign helped weaponize xenophobia and labor anxieties against hemp. It linked cannabis to Mexican immigrants and other out groups. Even though the law was targeting marijuana, of course the one that can get you high, the one with THC, industrial hemp still got caught in the mix. With this new law, farmers had to jump through legal hurdles, register their crops, pay fees and taxes, and overall the economics of hemp just started breaking down. There was a brief emergency resurrection of hemp around World War II, but it didn't last long. The damage was done, the hemp industry was frozen by red tape and bureaucracy, and finally the 1970s Controlled Substances Act put industrial hemp in the bucket of cannabis, keeping cultivation under tight DEA control. Add to that this not so great technology, this scratchy texture, yeah, hemp wasn't really set up for success. But tide was about to change, just hold on. Hemp is basically one of the few super materials that humanity has discovered that create incredible business opportunities. But before you can find that opportunity, you have to spot what the next super material is. The Hustle has published an incredibly useful playbook to evaluate and bet on the next wave of super materials, like mycelium, which is now used for sustainable biomaterials, construction, like bricks and insulation, and even as a leather alternative. There are massive opportunities for entrepreneurs, from $100 products to $50,000 supply chain partnerships, especially as regulatory barriers fall and technology finally catches up. You can grab a copy of this playbook here, or I'll just drop a link in the description. It's completely free and includes 5 new materials with opportunities that you can act on today. Now, who would want to invest any money to try to solve hemp's hurdles when the plant is illegal in the country? Industrial hemp in the US was practically frozen in time, but once again, hemp refused to die. Also, this demonization of hemp was mainly a US problem. Industrial hemp continued to be used in plenty of countries around the world through the 20th century without all this red tape. Hemp found uses in specialty papers and composites and even experimental car parts. That's a video for another day. Now, France was the largest producer of hemp in Europe, and in 2017, a group of French researchers devised a whole new approach to process hemp, and they published this paper. It was this method that was even more breakthrough than the decorticator that Popular Mechanics was excited about. It's called cottonization. So cottonization is the process of turning the long, coarse fibers of hemp into finer, shorter, uniform fibers, like cotton. Other breakthroughs, like using enzymes to break the hemp fiber, also helped. And once you've turned the hemp into this cotton-like material, in theory, you can weave it not into this, but into this, and make it soft and non-itchy. Now, these advancements helped solve the tech problem. But how about the second problem? Well, in 2019, 2 years after this paper came out, Levi's launched their first cottonized hemp collection, and other brands followed. Now, I have been working on this story for weeks before actually knowing how hemp actually feels like to the touch, but we're gonna find out. Right, so I got one cotton and one hemp. So this is a good old cotton shirt. Feels like you'd expect it to feel. This is the hemp t-shirt. The whole fabric is like thicker. Got my macro lens to show you. Okay, check this out. Right, so this is the hemp shirt. Notice that there are like these thin fibers coming out of it. And then this is cotton. Yeah, I don't think that you would notice this until you feel it. I guess it's a little bit warmer than this like thin cotton version, but feels great. Okay, so we've solved the tech, we've solved the fabric feel. In 2018, hemp was re-legalized in the US, and even more so than in 38, we need to protect our water. We need to reduce our pesticide use, and we want more sustainable products. So I ask you again, why is hemp not a thing? Well, we actually never solved problem number 3.
Okay, last time. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
So the stigma campaign that successfully ended up in the 1937 Tax Act still has effects to this day. One of the, in my opinion, most pointless issues is the 0.3% rule. So 0.3% is the legal THC limit for hemp before it technically becomes marijuana, which falls into a whole different set of rules for the crops. Now the problem is that hemp farms can sometimes go hot and spike up to 0.4%, making the whole farm illegal.
If you go over that 0.3%, if your crop goes hot, You have to destroy it.
That's just a start. Back in 2014, hemp was still federally illegal, but some states had legalized industrial hemp. And even in that case, growers faced obstacles. In 2014, for example, Kentucky's agricultural department had to sue the DEA after federal officials refused to release the state's legally imported hemp seeds, which left them stuck in customs. And even today, states like Texas are still adding more red tape. A 2025 Texas bill, which targets intoxicating hemp products, was worded so broadly that some worried it could even sweep hemp-based clothing. Now, this study, published by Cambridge University, documented some of the struggles that first-year hemp growers faced in Nebraska. So farmers reported burdensome regulation, no access to financing from banks, limited equipment, high premiums on insurance, but most crucially to our story, a stigma from their communities that expanded into tangible issues to run their businesses. Now, this is an actual quote from one of the farmers. One farmer put it, they, their neighbors, see it as wacky weed. They see it as a threat in some way, and it can be really hard to explain things like that to people. This stigma still impedes hemp. It's a very different crop than humans have used for thousands of years, and today, a federally legal crop in the US, a crop that could help reduce our reliance on the profoundly impactful cotton industry. Well, there are no documented efforts from the cotton lobby to slow down hemp. Odds are they're probably not happy about this new competitor that they have. And despite all of these hurdles, the hemp industry continues to move forward. The legalization of hemp's cousin across many states and countries is slowly but surely helping reduce some of these stigmas. The amount of land dedicated to hemp in the US almost doubled from 2022 to 2024. Plus, more countries around the world are legalizing or promoting hemp fiber industries. Multiple reports forecast that by 2030, the hemp industry specifically will quintuple from where it's now, surpassing $30 billion in the early 2030s. Maybe that is the missing piece. It's not just feeling the touch of hemp fabric, but witnessing entrepreneurs build cannabis business that get you dressed instead of getting you high. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, you should check my latest on another weird hidden industry, used cooking oil. And don't forget to download the Hustle's Guide on Finding Super Materials. I'm gonna link there and down here. Catch you on the next one.